This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. We are hot and heavy into 2023, and the NBA race is getting more and more interesting as we lead ourselves up to NBA All-Star Weekend, NBA trade deadline, and then that final stretch run to kind of finalize who wants to continue the next part of their NBA season, their quest for the chip. And needless to say, while top tier teams are continuing to show us that they are top tier teams, let it not be said that we are very much surprised by some of the fledgling teams that we thought may start to fade away, have very much left themselves to be very vibrant. And who none better than keeping a hawk eye from a world-like view about what's happening is my man, 50 grand, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Warrenshaw, who ain't afraid to fly and gallivant across the world with his significant other and still make time to give us the butter goods of what's happening in the NBA. What's good, brother?
You know what it is, family? You know what it is, continuing the New Year stuff here. And as we inch towards our 10-year anniversary and all of that, but as you allude to, man, a lot going on within the association as always. So we're here, as like you allude to, hey, give these folks the butter goods. I'm excited about this week's show. Mid-season report. If you can believe that shit already. Time is flying, man. Man, what a time to be alive, man. But excited to be here and hope all our fans, listeners will enjoy this one as always.
Hey, and proof positive, Shaw, podcasts are good for every growing relationship. If we can make it work for 10 years, I have no doubt that when you hit your 10-year, you know what I'm saying? You'll be like, oh, this is light work. This is light work.
Bro.
You know what I'm
Easy.
saying? I don't look quite as good as your wife, bro. But you know what I'm saying?
Not many people do.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? But I at least can acknowledge the fact that I have definitely posed challenges in your life to make sure that you know what I'm saying, happy wife, happy life, right? So
yeah, bro.
You know what I'm saying? Much shout out though, man, as you know, as obviously we start embarking on, you know, some pretty awesome achievements. And I think the one thing before we get into our midseason report, and it will also, you know, talk about what we normally do around this time of the year, which is our midseason awards. One of the things that I just want to say, and I hope, you know, our fans who have been with us, you know, our day ones and to our day nuns, the one thing that I hope that they all understand is that this isn't about us, you know, trying to be the best. Although what we give you, what we speak on, where we come from, it's from the heart. We always want to strive to be one of the best, to be the most consistent, to be one of the most viable listening, sources for you guys to get your information and your perspective and to engage in the conversation. The one thing that I just want people to understand, man, is that this isn't, you know, with the idea, the entity of, you know, making a gazillion dollars and, you know, being heralded up there. We take those accolades, you know, with pride. We're humbled by it. We're honored by it. But the consistency of us doing this show and the love that we have for the sport, what it's given us, what it gives our listeners more of a real understanding of, you know, where we're coming from and how we think through these things and you know, engage in these topics and come up with these topics and try to land these interviews and do all of this stuff. This is all love, you know what I'm saying? And so we gain no matter if we're not among the best of the best, if we're not top 5 in, you know, sports podcasting and things of that nature. You know, we've seen us, you know, the bottom of the bottom, and to be where we are today, man, I always say that it's just a blessing. But the most important blessing is to know that we've been doing this thing for about 10 years and we're still going strong. And that just speaks volumes. And I just wanted people to understand it. Like, man, we love, you know, making this time available to ourselves for us to speak on, you know, what we love about the culture, about the game of basketball and everything that comes with it.
I mean, I think it's well said, and I won't, you know, belabor into it too much more than that. You know, the show is definitely continues to have us have even a more meaningful, not more meaningful, but it allows us to continue to make sure that we speak every week, even if it's just in the basketball capacity, you know, not living in the same state as we once did. But at the end of the day, you know, as you alluded to, it's not about numbers and downloads. and the podcasting industry is very much a media machine now. So if you're not on a major network, then you're not going to be in the top list, and those people pay to be listed in those top lists as well too. But I actually did some research over the course of the weekend, and we're in there like maybe top 20 or top 15, or even top 50 in some other like random basketball podcast lists. And we're in there with your ESPNs and your ringers and things of that nature. And a lot of that is just based on longevity. So, shouts to us, you know what I mean, for keeping it going. And, kind of like the Diamond Dallas Page self high fives here. And we're going to keep it rocking. So, hopefully there's more content to come here with the Baseline NBA podcast. But as you alluded to, thanks to everybody who has supported us and listened to a show, appeared on a show at any point. And, again, more to come on our actual 10-year anniversary show.
Absolutely. And so obviously that means we got to do our plugs, right? So that this way people know, and those who are just catching on to what we've been doing for at least the last 10 years, where they can find us on the reg. So as always, be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at Game Face Lead, the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Available on all the major platforms, whatever you're using to listen to podcasts. Just put the Baseline NBA podcast in, add us on, and allow us to be your go-to listening pleasure, discussing all things happening in the association. Shout out to my man Shaw, as he has figured out a way for us now to add faces to the voices, so you can also catch us on YouTube as well too. And listen, much like how we've been trying to grow this audience from an audio perspective, we definitely want to grow this audience as well too from a video perspective. So give a like, give a subscribe, you know what I'm saying? Roll with us. Give us your thoughts and comments. Don't feel like it's only about us speaking all day, every day about the game. You let us know what what you want to lend your voice to, so that this way we can make sure we acknowledge and address those particular topics as well too. As always, the Baseline runs with the 19 Media Group family, so be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com so you can catch us and all of the great content that is out there. The 19 Media Group be running these content streets. All right, so our show today, we are doing our mid-season review, our mid-season report. We're going to kind of break down teams, the best teams, the worst teams, teams that surprise us, teams that we're looking to see improve going into the second half, teams that we probably think it's time for them to start doing their R&B thing and tanking. Or maybe not so much tanking. We don't encourage that idea of it, but maybe just not be as so proactive about winning as they might think that they need to be. And then we'll also get into our midseason awards. That'll be our subject of the breakdown. So, Shaw, let's do it right now, man. Midseason report. Best teams of the NBA thus far as we head to the midseason.
Yeah, so I'll keep this one relatively simple. I'm just going to go with the best team with the best record. They've had some minor injuries and are going to go through something right now a little bit, potentially with Jalen Brown. But Boston has been the most overall consistent team. Had maybe two rough stretches, if you will, where they maybe lost 3 out of 5 or whatever the case would be. But sitting right now, first 30-win team in the NBA, just really, really great basketball. Headed by Joe Mazzulla, but Jason Tatum in the MVP conversation, which we'll obviously get to a little bit later on. Jalen Brown, again, just having his most consistent and his best year statistically. The addition of Malcolm Brogdon has been immense as well too. So for me, it's Boston, but the Denver Nuggets are a very, very close second to me in that too. Milwaukee sputtered a little bit. You can mention a couple of the teams, Brooklyn, Memphis, et cetera, et cetera. But to me, right now, it's the Boston Celtics, and it's pretty clear cut to me in terms of what they've been able to do this first half of the season.
Yeah, the absolute best team to me right now are the Boston Celtics. And it's interesting because you think that what we worried about more so about this team was what they were going to be able to do offensively, because we thought that their defense was just solid and sound and can only get better. When actuality, the team's defense has been very slow, but now you're starting to see it pick up, especially with the reemergence of Robert Williams back into the starting rotation. We're seeing Mazzulla actually really lean on his role players, and I am just more so surprised about the depth of this team, Shaw. They really do have a good, solid, deep basketball team. I know we give praises to Malcolm Brogdon filling out as that sixth man or playing that six-man role, but I think he's having an influence on Peyton Pritchard. I think he's got an influence on who am I thinking of? Is it
Derek White?
Derek White, who at times he could be skittish, but he he comes in and he makes a play. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know where it comes from. He can have 10 minutes of just looking like, I don't know what he's doing there on the court and why Missoula's still out there. And then all of a sudden he comes in, he makes like this defensive player. He shoots this three. They just really have a all around really deep team. And it's fascinating because some guys you may see fall off the grid, so to speak, in the rotation. And then suddenly an injury goes down, or maybe there's load management in play. Next thing you know, these guys come right back in and is act as if, they just were part of the starting rotation at the beginning of the year, when Missoula was kind of messing around trying to, get some consistency with these guys. So by all means, Shaw, I completely agree with you. Some honorable mentions though, definitely the Nuggets. Clearly when you've got, two-time MVP, back-to-back MVP, kind of hard to argue, but the way that Jamal Murray now is starting to come in to getting comfortable, they're going to be dangerous. Bucks, they're going to always be in the mix. They're a little skittish though, because I think Budenholzer has to really figure out that rotation and how to utilize it. They allow too many teams to come back when they look good one half and then just basically like pack it in the second half. The Brooklyn Nets really have surprised me. There's no question they're one of the best teams. Memphis Grizzlies, what more can be said? If they are healthy and they are whole, they will be one of the most dangerous teams out of the Western Conference.
Yeah, very well said too. So again, Denver, I'll say this really quick point. I think Denver's probably done the most with the level of inconsistency of their high level players. Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, even Jokic to some degree has missed some games, where Boston has been relatively healthy with Tatum and Brown specifically heading the ship, if you will. Smart's missed a handful here. Brogdon's missed a handful there. Horford, even rest days, and over Robert Williams. But I think if you're looking at it in its totality, what Denver needs for them to be successful, they've probably done a little bit more in the Western Conference with that. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's just not knocking. You can't knock any. All these are really great elite teams. And if Milwaukee gets Chris Middleton back, when that happens, I guess presumably they should be right in the mix as well too. And obviously Brooklyn dealing with KD not being here now for the next month. So a lot going on here with some of these elite teams. And even Memphis, again, they didn't have Bane for a while and Jaren Jackson for a while. And so, they've all dealt with something. And for them, all of these teams to still be near the top of their conferences really is a true testament to the overall roster construction and some of the MVP candidates that are on each one of these teams.
Absolutely. And one other thing to highlight too, and I think something you should look for as well, the Boston Celtics really have only had one hiccup in the road in the beginning, like during this first half of the season. We've seen the Denver Nuggets go through some, a couple of highs and lows. And to your point, because of the inconsistency of their starters, I think what'll be interesting is whether or not we're still going to consider the Denver Nuggets, the team, quote unquote, to beat if they maintain being the top team coming out of, with the top record in the Western Conference. Because when I look at the Boston Celtics, I think each and every single night will always be a challenge and be a test. I think with the emergence of the Brooklyn Nets now coming into play, I think that they're going to continue to push the Boston Celtics to really shoot for that 60-win season so they can position themselves to have home court advantage throughout the whole playoffs, right? So I would not be surprised. Like the way that the Western Conference is set up, while we look at a team like the Denver Nuggets as one of the best teams, it could very well likely they may not wind up with the best record by the time that the season ends. Mm-hmm. All right, let's position ourselves to the worst teams, which I'm really surprised, Shaw. Typically, when we talk about worst teams, we're probably talking about maybe 6, 7 teams. Really, we only have 4 teams that we can outline and say, yeah, they're really not, they're not really good. No matter how you slice it, they got work to do. And we're basically looking at Shaw, Rockets, Spurs, Hornets, Pistons. But to me, that speaks a lot more about how good the rest of the NBA is right now, because all of those other teams are hanging around going into the halfway point with an opportunity to see if they can make a surge in the second half of the season to get themselves into the play-in.
Yeah, I think the worst team on paper to me is actually San Antonio. While they're not the worst team record-wise right now, that distinction goes to the Houston Rockets. I think if I was trying to build a team, I'd rather have Houston's overall talent and roster with Pop's coaching, I guess is kind of what it boils down to. And that's not a shot, not dissing, Houston's coach in any capacity. I just think, again, they're doing better than I would have expected them. But for San Antonio, Vasil, he's hurt now, but he was playing well. Kellen Johnson's having a great year. Trey Jones is playing really regular as well too. So to me, though, I'd rather have KPJ and and Şengün, you know what I mean? And guys like that, who just feel like, hey, there's more of a ceiling there. Even Jabari Smith Jr., obviously, and Jalen Green. So again, the Rockets have been the worst team record-wise, but I think the worst team talent-wise is San Antonio, but they're doing a little bit better because they have such a, experienced and seasoned head coach.
Very interesting angle that you're taking from this, Shaw, because if I replicated where you're coming from, I probably would say that the worst team would be the Charlotte Hornets. And the only reason why I'm saying that is because you have a star player in LaMelo Ball Jr. who, if he's healthy, this team actually can show potential and be competitive. When he's not on the court, this team just seems very disoriented and the roster makeup just doesn't seem to fit overall with the level of competitiveness that's required for them to hang in the East, which then causes a trickle down effect with the decision-making process, with players and their desire to play for the Charlotte Hornets. And this has been what's plagued the organization for years upon years upon years. At least you can make the argument for the Rockets, the Spurs, and the Pistons that if as long as they've got talent and they've got good coaching, the organization will allow them to grow, and you can essentially see them over the next couple of years coming out of the cellar. With the Charlotte Hornets, it's like it's always a fine line. Like if they don't get this right, they set themselves back like 6-7 years. And it's a shame because they seem to always get access to some talented players who wind up getting a little bit of the spotlight, a little bit of the limelight, but it goes no further because they figure out a way to shoot themselves in the foot. So maybe that's the reason why I'm looking at things in the same light that you're looking at it, but I focus it more on the Hornets simply because they've got precious pieces, precious gems that I think that they're going to wind up squandering due to the fact that this team just does not know how to win unless things are set up perfectly, which they haven't been able to do in the last, 10, 15 years, even when you account for the years that they've had Kemba Walker. You're right. It's just like there's no stay in people's desire to keep success when it comes to the Charlotte Hornets.
All right. Well, I'm not going to challenge you there because I have a lot more to say about Charlotte later on in our show. I'll say this one last thing on it is Steve Clifford. Interesting decision.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. All right. Coming up, Sean and I will break down the most surprising teams with the most to prove, and time to tank. And obviously, you do not want to miss out on our breakdown as we start counting down to who we consider our midseason award winners so far this season. So we got a lot to get into. You don't want to miss out here on The Baseline. We are back, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. As we keep things moving along in our midseason report, Shaw, the most surprising teams, good or bad, so far this season.
So I'm going to go on the good route.
You said it with a collective sigh. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because I was trying to figure out if I wanted to take the high road or if I wanted to be, negative in some.
You want to be the heel. Be the heel. Nah, I'm always the heel. Be the heel. It's okay to be the heel.
No, I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna be good. So to me, and this is something we spoke about before in terms of a move that was made last season, and both teams are really relishing as a result of it now. And I'm gonna go back again to the Indiana Pacers Sacramento Kings trade with Domas Sabonis and Tyrese Haliburton. So to me, the most surprising team, good or bad, I'm gonna go on the good side, and it's the Indiana Pacers. Nobody saw them being above 500 at this stage. If you would have told me which team had the better record, at this stage of the season, the Pacers or the Golden State Warriors, I think it's pretty clear what direction you would have been leaning to. Yes, Curry's been injured, but they were playing bad even before that. So to me, Indiana is the most welcome surprise of the NBA season. A team that we definitely thought was going to be in the Wembanyama sweepstakes, and you could throw teams like OKC in there because SGA has been so amazing. I think maybe kind of coming out of nowhere, they're still a little bit, they're obviously below 500 still, but the Pacers in a very, very tough and competitive Eastern Conference, being above 500, even with Haliburton now out and Miles Turner now dealing with some injuries, to me, I think they're the biggest surprise of the league thus far, by hands down.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. The Indiana Pacers, to me, have cemented themselves in a way where I think they may actually change the conversation about what's really important, especially when we talk about, the eventual drafting of Victor Wembanyama. Here's my thing, Shaw. You look at the teams that are going to be competitive over the next several years, and it starts with having a quality guard. And I think the fact that Haliburton has I don't want to say found a home. I certainly think he has made a mark in using the Indiana Pacers to highlight something that they're going to need to kind of really come to grips with. This is probably going to be their come to Jesus moment in recognizing, what are you trying to build with this team? What is it that you've missed on in the last few years when you've had Victor Oladipo and you've had Paul George, and like at some point you're gonna have to settle down and really be firm on the idea that we could be good with the roster that we're trying to build with, and we've got to be completely committed to doing that. And I think you're seeing that with teams like the Sacramento Kings. You're seeing that with teams like the Utah Jazz, who these guys, basically, you've got a lot of wayward players, but the fixture is within the culture. It's embedded in the way that the Danny Ainges and all of these other guys who have now come in and taken over have kind of shown you, this is the blueprint of what I want to see us when we're trying to build this team, top down. And so this is the reason why the Pacers, the Kings, and the Jazz are the most talked about in the most positive way, because you're hoping that over the next couple of years, they stick to this blueprint, they stick to this identity. And I think that they're going to be one of those teams that are going to catapult themselves, whether it be the Eastern Conference or in the Western Conference conversation. Now, teams like the Suns, Warriors, and Clippers, I don't know if it's this, that they're high on the success that they've had over a couple of years or high on the hype, but you can clearly see that the youth movement is catching up with the wily veterans, right? And so now it's starting to rear its ugly head, because business decisions are going to have to be made with the Phoenix Suns, the Golden State Warriors, and also with the Los Angeles Clippers, ironically, because these are the teams that are surprisingly bad in the sense of what we expected them to be over the next few years. Only the Warriors look like the team with the most promise, because they've proven that they can come and do it after their adversities. The Phoenix Suns and the Los Angeles Clippers still have not shown us that they are ready to take that next step, even though the Clippers were close by getting to the Western Conference Finals at one point or another, right? Or the Suns getting to the finals. But both of those teams have taken steps back. They haven't taken steps forward. They're not clear-cut favorites to get to the West. So it's interesting how this is all kind of, come full circle when we talk about the youth movement and we talk about the wily veterans and where they land and where they'll be.
Yeah, 3 teams that we expected to be probably the top 3 seeds. Really, I mean, maybe at least
right. They were supposed
the
to be
top 4
over the last 3, 4, 5 years, going back to 2018, 2019.
Yeah, I think we saw obviously the Denver thing and maybe Memphis as well too. A lot of people thought Memphis might have taken a step back, but you would have thought in some combination these 2 of these 3 teams would be in the top 4, and then if nothing else would be in the top 5, and they're all right around or just slightly below 500 at this stage, which is really, really disappointing. I think for all of them. Injuries aside, it's just you just wouldn't have expected that to happen for any of these 3 teams.
All right, now let's go ahead and transition, Shard, with the teams that we think need to prove something. They need to show us something. As we say in one of our segments, impress me. Which teams need to impress you in the second half?
So I'm gonna go. Again, we have an entire list, right? And I'm gonna go with what I think has to happen, or who has the most to kind of like what is riding on this. And ironically, I want to say the Clippers, who we just talked about, but I'm gonna go with the Atlanta Hawks, only because there are some extremely weird vibes. Remember, I talked about Chicago having weird vibes and the Sixers having weird vibes at the beginning of the year. The Sixers seem to have kind of settled that situation. Chicago's still a little bit wonky, but nothing but friggin' Stranger Things, spooky shit going on in Atlanta, man. Shams coming out with weird reports.
You wish they had Netflix and chill in their system, but
but Shams said that Nate was considering stepping down. They had the weird situation where they suspended Trae Young, and DeJounte comes out really saying, yeah, it's a lot of off the court things going on. John Collins, is he coming or is he going? Capella's been in and out of the lineup all season long. To me, it's the Atlanta Hawks after making that splashy move to get DeJounte over there to play alongside Trae Young. Now you're talking about Trae Young may want out after they just got somebody who they wanted and they paid, a king's ransom to get him over there. To me, they are the team with the most to prove because they've probably sacrificed the most for the short term and quote unquote long term. You can throw Minnesota maybe into that too. Not sure that Gobert fit is working out all that well, but to me, Atlanta is a team with the most to prove in the second half.
I've said for the longest time though, Shaw, that this team just does not seem right and part of it was the combination of Young and Collins. I just think that it's fool's gold with those two. Not that I don't think either of these guys are great players. They are great players, but I just don't know if they're great together, and they would be great for the Atlanta Hawks. And I think the Hawks missed the opportunity to move him to get something that I think falls more in line with why they even went through the trouble of getting Dejounte Murray. I think their goal was to put a combination of Dejounte Murray and Trae Young together all along, right? Whether if it was going to be Dejounte or not, but I'm just saying a style of player similar to that. But they needed to move John Collins, because now you're beginning to see the inconsistency full blown with all three of these type of players on the same roster. I don't think that this team is going to be good enough to get themselves to an Eastern Conference Finals. And I think at some point they're going to have to come to the stark reality of moving one of these guys. They're not going to move Young. They're not going to move Murray. So guess who might the odd man out be? But I just think what it's going to do, it's going to brandish a much more uglier version of how this thing has played itself out. Because when the momentum was riding and the conversations of the trade rumors taking place happened a lot earlier, that's when they should have pulled the trigger, because they didn't do a whole lot to quash that down. They just kind of satisfied the murmurs by giving him the contract extension. But that to me is not saying anything. And then you can clearly see this team is just not all together. I'm going to take a different approach, Shaw, with the teams that I feel like have the most proof in the second half. I'm going to go with the Brooklyn Nets as one of those teams. Now, hear me out and why I'm saying this. The Brooklyn Nets have so much to play for going into this season. And I think the reason why you probably wouldn't put them in there is because of how good they've looked so far this season. Well, you know what? This team on talent alone always looks good. And they've done this before, even when they had Steve Nash as their head coach. What I want to see is, can these guys see this thing through? Because in the second half of the season, since Durant and Irving have been there, this team has fallen off. This team has shown inconsistency. This team has kind of backdoored their way into the playoff conversation, where people take their mind off of the idea that they really are serious about making this run. Now, if KD comes back, he isn't hampered by the injury that he's currently suffering right now, if Kyrie Irving steps up and shows more leadership that this team is going to need in the second half of the season, given the way that this roster is structured, this team will be right in the thick of things. I don't know if I'm ready to buy into that completely just yet, because this team has not proven to me in the second half of seasons that they know how to finish the deal and position themselves where their path to getting to an Eastern Conference Finals and getting to the NBA Finals should be easier for them than harder for them. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with them. And then you brought up the Timberwolves, and it's interesting, Shaw, because part of me is like, wow, the Timberwolves gave us this little lift of confidence that they're going to be a really good team. And then the beginning of the season, they've proven to me, they're like, damn it, man, they are who we thought we were. Right?
I mean, and then, not having Cat for like 30 games. I mean,
yeah, I get it. But you would think, though, still with the way that this roster is constructed, losing Cat, this team should be talented enough to hold their own. Like even with the players that they added, they didn't so much lose so many players that what they showed us last year to get themselves in the playoffs, you didn't think was not good enough, that especially in a Western Conference, it isn't as nearly as good. But now we're giving more credit to teams like the Kings. We're giving more credit to teams like the Jazz. Are we saying that because the Wolves have taken a step back, or are we saying that really because the Kings and the Jazz have gotten that much better? Which then highlights how the Wolves, I think, have taken for granted the momentum they gave themselves the second half of the season last year to what they're now showing us at the beginning or the first half of the season this year.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about Minnesota is that, it was an immense roster turnover. Like, so many guys were new on that team. So the continuity obviously was going to take some time to build. I wasn't ready to put them into my upper echelon of the Western Conference thing. Some people were, because of Gobert and what he was supposed to bring defensively. He just looked like a shell of himself to some degree, does not look comfortable. We're saying all this now. I think they won 5 of their last 6 games. So
he's showing more rib, though. He was showing more rib. Looking real comfortable with his, with his pecs and his ribs.
But
that record
at the end of the day, like I said,
lost a little bit of fat on.
Maybe so, but and Ant-Man is a deal. So again, winners of 5 of their last 6 has to record. So not trying to bag on them too much. I just think they thought they'd be better, and maybe they will figure out some of their chemistry issues. But D'Angelo Russell's name is in the rumor mill now. All kind of stuff going on there in Minnesota. So, but I think these are all great picks, and your point about Brooklyn does make a lot of sense. I said when we spoke about them a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, well, let's see if they're able to continue it. So they still have a lot to prove, and now KD's out. So can Kyrie, when he's the leader of a team, it's always been interesting to to put it
To say the
mildly.
least, yeah, to say the least. And you know what? Who their mirror image is? The Los Angeles Clippers. I agree with you. I think those two teams, because there's going to be a lot's going to be said about these teams and their organizations, given what they show us the second half of the season and what kind of run that they're actually going to make. And I'm only saying that to the players, not necessarily the coaches and the organization themselves, because you got to give credit to Shai and Ballmer. They've shelled out the money. They've made good on what they thought these players were going to bring to the table, and the players have not delivered as of yet, regardless of what the excuses are on or off the court. So the idea is that I think people have to kind of take a step back and really look at it. You know, when you got owners that are willing to spend the money, you know, pony up on the luxury tax, you know, take the penalties, take these hits, and the players themselves are the ones that are holding back this progression. You know what I'm saying? It just kind of makes you wonder, why would it not surprise you that the organizations take a different approach or take different steps and different measures, not to protect money, but also to protect the sanctity of whether or not the players should have that much quote unquote empowerment, calling the shots about what type of the makeup of that team that they're putting together to be competitive and championship worthy is going to look like. All right, Shaw. Finally, time to tank.
Yeah.
Tank. All right, maybe that's not as good as,
Well,
tank.
we can, as I say in the
Maybe
culture.
one day we can get him on here and he can give us a drop for something like this. You know what I'm saying?
Well, he's a wild dude too. But
Let's
we can call this one "Give Up the Ghost."
give up the ghost.
So, for me, it's the team you talked about a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Charlotte didn't come into the season with the intentions of being this bad at all. I think we looked at Utah, we looked at Indiana, and thought they could potentially be where Charlotte is currently right now. But the Clifford, redo has not worked. Obviously LaMelo being injured for a majority part of the season. Now he's hooping, he's really balling since coming back. But Hayward is on his annual siesta, always in and out of the lineup, got things going on. The Bridges situation to begin the year just kind of maybe threw some things off kilter. PJ Washington's been pretty good. Kelly Oubre was really good for them, but now he's hurt as well. And it just hasn't equated to wins. So I think for Charlotte, it's probably time to embrace this tank. See what you're able to do. Maybe sell off some parts, if you will, the Oubres, the Haywards, maybe even the PJ Washingtons, not all of them, but one or two of those three probably need to go, and see how you can basically more or less, I'll say again, you don't want to say bottom out, but it's not going to happen for you for this year. And then I'll say really quickly, I think Toronto is in a weird space. They have very good players, Van Vliet, OG Ananobi, obviously Scotty Barnes, Siakam, like all those guys. It just hasn't translated for them in the Eastern Conference. I wouldn't expect them to be worse than Indiana are. Indiana is currently. And while there's not a 15 game gap per se in that, I just don't know if Toronto's going to be able to get there ultimately. So those are the two teams that I think should probably let's see what we can do. Maybe trade off some pieces here and look to build towards the future.
I'm gonna go with the Detroit Pistons, and I'm saying this only because of the fact that you lose Cade Cunningham for the year, and I'm finding it hard to see, even with Jaden Ivey, who we'll talk about, is gonna probably be in the conversation for Rookie of the Year for this upcoming season. I'm finding it difficult to figure out what this team is really going to, what good is it going to amass with the way that their roster is structured, right? You still have Bojan Bogdanovic. You still have Alec Burks, right? And again, I don't know the mindset of Dwayne Casey. I don't know if it's the influence from the top down. I don't know if this is his mentality. I'm just saying that no good comes from having veteran guys who really are impeding the obvious of seeing some of these younger guys get the minutes and get the opportunity and the time to play. They're not contributing them to winning basketball games.
So hold on, but I have to challenge you on this one point. There's only one veteran guy who's there doing anything, and that's Bogdanovic. Alec Burks isn't really taking any minutes away from anybody. So it's Bogdanovic is the only one, and that's very much a tradable asset for them. Everybody else on that team is young.
Okay. No, and I get that. Okay. So well, I'm just saying that there are guys on that roster, right? That, I mean, Burks does get some playing time. He's not eating up young guys' minutes, but he's getting playing time. He's being utilized on the roster in a way which, again, is kind of it's confusing me as far as whether or not this is more influenced by Dwayne Casey or Dwayne Casey himself. This is how he sees things. And if that's the case, I'm saying that if you are the Detroit Pistons, you're going to really have to to contemplate whether or not Dwayne Casey is the answer for you moving forward for that team, right? Because I'm not saying fire Dwayne Casey. No good comes from firing a guy midseason, especially with his best player on the mend for the rest of the year. But if this team doesn't look like they're going to amass wins, it's making me wonder that when you do get Cade Cunningham, do you want to wait for that team to struggle out the gate come next year, right? Off of what you're already seeing that this team is incapable of doing right now. If you really want to assess, make moves and things of that nature, I say see this thing through. But I really think that there's going to have to be some changes that are going to take place. And I'm just not seeing where the Detroit Pistons are lending themselves to be better. Even if they did what they did last year, where they went on, I think they won like 13 of their last 18 or 20 games or something like that. They finished on a positive note. I don't know how much positivity really comes from that, especially with Dwayne Casey being the head coach under these type of circumstances. So to me, I can see that the Detroit Pistons are being one of those teams to quote unquote give up the ghost, especially if you think that your executive team is going to start highlighting and packaging to start putting guys together. If you believe that Ivey and Cunningham and is the future moving forward with maybe a couple of the other players who still have shown you that they're good enough to still be on this roster and everything like that.
Yeah, it's Bogdanovich, Burks, and maybe Corey Joseph. Those are all the guys that are over 30 on the team, if you will. So the true adults in the room. Bogdanovich is the only thing that's going to get them a yield. Everybody else, they've already embraced playing Jalen Duren. He's hurt now. Can't feel like everyone I talk about, but he's dealing with some injuries now. But they embraced putting him into the starting lineup. Bagley's still young, but he's hurt as well too. Isaiah Stewart just coming back from an injury. So to me, like they played their young guys, and it's just those again. It's really Bogdanovich who every contender is like, hey, what would it take? And they remember they said we already talked about it. They gave him a 2-year extension a little while ago, to try to make, I guess, dealing him more palatable for maybe an acquiring team, not worrying, okay, we have to give up these goods and he's going to be opted out this year. It was all done strategically. So they're Bogdanovich not burning a hole in their pocket, but at the same time, do you just kind of want him there to kind of be that veteran presence? Or do you say, you know what, you're right, we're not going to be good. He doesn't fit our timeline. And let's go ahead and see what we can get for him and put him in a better situation as well, too, moving forward.
He's de-incentivizing the ability for the Detroit Pistons to really have a clear-cut decision about what they want to do with this roster come trade deadline time, second half of the season, and moving forward. You know what I'm saying? Because ultimately, head coaches will coach the guys out there they know are going to go out there and compete. And I'm not saying you're supposed to compete to lose. What I'm saying is you're competing, understanding that the cohesiveness of this team is going to be there when the season ends and going into training camp next season, right? Yeah. And the makeup of this team is going to change yet again. And I think the philosophy of this team may very well change. Because if you're Dwayne Casey, you would be coaching your ass off for this team to improve in certain metrics. And I'm not seeing where they're doing that. And again, you can't tell me that it only rests on Cade Cunningham. Yes, star player, the guy on the team. But that also means that the rest of these other guys are getting opportunities for them to step up and to help this team look better than what they look like, knowing that he's not going to be there for the rest of this season.
Okay.
All right. So now, time for us to do our little breakdown segment where we give out our mid-season awards. You do not want to miss out, man, as we go six-man, defensive player, Roy, most improved, and then obviously the MVP. We got a lot to get into. You don't want to miss out here on the baseline. Time to break it down to the bone gristle. Time now for the breakdown. Lee, Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast, and it's time for us to do our mid-season awards. We are going to run through the gamut, Shaw. We love doing it around this time of the year. So sometimes I think we tend to be a little bit right because by the time that the season ends, it just goes all so differently. So it's always good to get our interim report cards when it comes to doing the mid-season rewards. So let's start off with the most improved player of the year, Shaw. We've got some pretty nice candidates out there. Good pickings this time around. Lauri Markanen, SGA, Tyrese Haliburton, Jalen Brunson. Who are you leaning on?
I'm going to go with Markanen, just because I didn't see him being a borderline all-star this year. If you would have told me SGA could average 30, I would have said that's possible. I mean, he's doing it in a very inefficient manner. And, I think we talked about Haliburton and Jalen Brunson, just opportunity. Both of those guys being the mans on their proverbial rosters and getting off teams where there was other guys that were going to stand in their way. So those numbers are not surprising to me. I think Markanen on what was supposed to be the tanking Jazz, and not only just the numbers, but really pushing to be an all-star in the Western Conference. And to me, that's where I would give him the most improvement. It's the most surprising story of the guys listed here that we've talked about. And it's no diss to anybody else because they're all deserving. But to me, it's just Markanen because I just didn't see this level of this production from him this year.
I'm going to go Tyrese Haliburton, and it's not because I don't think Markanen is deserved. I think Markanen is going to wind up winning this, Shaw, if the Utah Jazz continue and trend in this particular direction. And I think a direct correlation to whatever success the Utah Jazz has is going to be because of Lauri Markanen. But I'm going to go with Tyrese Haliburton on this, man. He had a horrible season last year. Things was just not clicking, in my opinion, between him and De'Aaron Fox. And it's not that I think he has a problem with De'Aaron Fox. I just think that he just the style of his play and the way that he wanted, to help. I don't think he understood where his role was. Was he a guard? Was he a two guard? This back and forth type of thing. And we did our previous segment, freeing up the ghost. Well, we freed up the Haliburton, and the Indiana Pacers are cashing in quite lovely because of it. Now, this has nothing to do with wins and losses. It's purely about what Tyrese Haliburton means to that Indiana Pacers team. I think that you can make the argument that what Haliburton is giving the Pacers right now is a window into the possible future of having a solid team, a solid base to work from. And that, to me, I know it's not a metric that can be measured, but I think it will be translatable in what we see as far as the outcome of their record this season and also the numbers that Haliburton is going to put up. And don't be surprised when you go into the second half of this season, Shaw, right, that we see Haliburton even turn it up more if the Indiana Pacers are hanging around somewhere around the mid-tier mark of making a push per se to not be a play-in team, but be something more than that. I think Tyrese Haliburton would be the direct causation of that.
Sure. I mean, he's doing what he said he was going to do, right? He said he wanted to be a 2010 guy, and he's been exactly that. And the Pacers have been a surprise team. So I think if you're using your theory, if you want to reward winning as a topic, as a point of that too for this award, and that's also very helpful. I think, I don't believe, was it Malik or somebody we had on the show earlier was like, hey, this award usually does go to somebody who's impacted winning in another way. I think Lauri has, obviously, with Utah. But he's just obviously not the same situation that's going on in Indiana. So I can go with that as well too. But man, 25-9 for Markanen, just that's more surprising to me than seeing Tyrese come out and saying he was going to average 20 and 10 and him actually doing it. But either way, you can't go wrong. And I think this will be a very, very split vote. And it's going to come down to how they all finish at the end of the year. But midseason, we can have our respective conversations.
And don't be surprised if the politics speak on Jalen Brunson getting this award too, because if the New York Knicks have a surprisingly great season, it's going to be kind of hard to not acknowledge, whether it be Randall or Jalen Brunson. Somebody's going to probably be toting some kind of award or getting some kind of kudos for that, as well too. So good call on your part about Jalen Brunson, because I think that he'll probably wind up having they'll have more talk about him as an MIP than people are buying into the idea about Julius Randle being as an MVP. Rookie of the year, Shaw. Paulo, Banchero, Benedict, Mathurin, and Jaden, Ivey. I don't know. I think this one is a little bit of a no-brainer, so to speak, but I find it to be a little bit closer than most people probably will give it credit for.
Yeah, I mean, Mathurin has been great in Indiana, and Ivy's starting to come on. He hasn't been as good as I thought he would have been without Cunningham, but Banchero in Orlando is clear cut to me. I would be surprised if he doesn't win every single first place for it. It's just got to be him, I think, at this stage. Barring anything unforeseen. Again, this is a midseason report, so if we were giving out awards now, that's where I would go. So not a whole lot for me to discuss there. Again, Mathurin and Ivey been amazing, but Banchero has been the dude for sure.
Yeah, I was surprised by Mathurin, and just the way that he has. Again, and this, could again attribute to the Tyrese Haliburton effect, but Banchero is just a one-man band, man. He reminds me of Antonio Banderas in Desperado. Yeah, man. Just, what I'm saying? All he needs is, he's just a mariachi, man. You know
All
what I'm
right, as
saying?
long
Don't,
as
don't
long as
let
you're
him,
not saying
don't let
he's
him
Puss
open
in
up that
Boots, that's
case.
all I care about.
Yeah, don't let him open up that case, man. You know what I'm saying? And look at how good Bobo looks, man. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, all right, defensive player of the year. This one is really interesting, Shaw, because the usual suspects, I think we don't have the opportunity to highlight them, whether it because of injury or just inconsistency. So we got a new rat pack of the deploy ready to destroy in the NBA.
Yeah, for me, Jaren Jackson, I don't think he qualifies just yet because he's missed much time in the beginning of the year. He's right up there, obviously the I guess per game blocks leader, but I'd honestly go with Brook Lopez. He's consistently, and I've talked about this on previous shows over years, he's one of the better centers in just contesting shots, like running out and closing out on guards and wings, and then also obviously protecting the rim. I just think what he's been able to do from Milwaukee's defense, even while they've been struggling, he's just been such an anchor and lighthouse for them defensively that I think he might be the guy this year. A lot of talk was for OG Anunboby for the way he began the year. Then again, the Raptors began to slip. Adebayo was my my preseason pick for this, but Lopez has just been tremendous. I mean, tremendous. If you watch him and how he rotates, how he communicates and jumps off a guy, he knows how to read and then get back to his man and get reattached. It's really been a really great thing to watch him play defense this year. And while Jaren Jackson is giving you the numbers statistically in the blocks, I think Lopez is doing all the intangibles for me on the outside of giving you blocks and steals.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on this one, Shaw. If there's anyone who I would be giving my midseason award to, it would be Brook Lopez. And as much as I want to give those kudos to Bam Adebayo and Jaren Jackson Jr., these guys are going to probably get that trophy towards the end of the year or be in the conversation towards the end of the year. It's kind of ironic, man, because this is a great opportunity for there to be a recalibration about how we give this award out. And it's not so much the fact that I'm saying that Bam isn't deserving of getting the Defensive Player of the Year award at some point. He should be getting it. But you see these peaks and valleys with him. There are times that he's there and there are times that he's not there. And you can see how it's affected the Miami Heat. Jaren Jackson Jr., he can't stay healthy. Then you see a guy like Brook Lopez, who from defensive metrics, are comparable to what happens when Giannis is in his defensive bag, right? And so I'm just saying, why do we not acknowledge that? I agree with you. I think Brook Lopez, to me, should be the clear-cut defensive player of the year right now, because you can make the argument that it's because of him that we're still talking about the Milwaukee Bucks being a legitimate threat to the Boston Celtics. It's not about the offense. It's about the teams having enough players to stop the other team's best players. And when you've got bigs like Giannis, like Brook Lopez, who can clog up the paint, force Tatum and Brown to jack up shots, force the rest of those other guys to jack up contested shots, that speaks volumes. Also, he is a mismatch nightmare on the opposite end for guys like Robert Williams. He's a great defensive rebounder now. He's a guy that can stretch the floor and force guys like Robert Williams to have to close out on him because of how he shoots the three. So it's not just the defensive metrics of blocking shots and maybe, paint posts and things of that nature. It's also about what he forces guys offensively to do that he has the advantage on because of the way that he has changed his game. I agree with you 100%, Shaw. Brook Lopez is that dude for Defensive Player of the Year. He has stepped up in so many different ways to make the Milwaukee Bucks still a top 5 defensive team in the NBA. All right, 6th Man of the Year. Woo! This one's a hot one, right? Because there's some names on here we'd be like, are we really throwing him in the hat? You got to throw him in the hat. 6th Man of the Year, Shaw. Who you looking at?
So to me, it's the one that, and again, in our preseason conversation, it was actually the Miles and Jack show, actually. So my apologies. That wasn't, Malik earlier. But it's what I didn't necessarily think was going to work. And, while the list for me is probably Westbrook, Mathurin, Jordan Poole, Malcolm Brogdon, and maybe you can throw a couple other guys in there. Brogdon was my preseason pick, but it is Westbrook for me. I think he's only started 3 games, 16, 15 points a game, if you will, 7, 8 assists a game coming off the bench. Yeah, he's playing a lot of minutes, obviously, still, but For at least for that side of what the Lakers are doing, it's working. Now, again, if you want to reward winning, you probably go with the Jordan Poole situation or Mathurin, especially from the Indiana being the surprise story. Poole's numbers are a little bit skewed. He's also started 20 games this year because Curry's been out, so I think that hurts his overall case. But that's his natural role is to be that sixth man. But obviously 21-5 off the bench or off the bench and starting hybrid, it's nothing to sneeze at. But as a true bench guy, it's Westbrook. But I just didn't see Mathurin being as good as he has been coming off the Indiana bench as well too.
I'm going to go on the opposite side of the spectrum for you, Shaw. As much as I think Westbrook should be that dude and should be in the conversation, I'm going to go with Malcolm Brogdon. Now, here's where it gets challenging. His numbers probably won't measure up to the rest of these guys because the way that he scores the basketball is very is very unusual to the status quo of what we use to measure the sixth man of the year, if you get where I'm coming from, right? But I'm looking at all of Malcolm Brogdon's metrics. He can make an argument that he essentially is the unsung MVP for the Boston Celtics, especially during the stretch when they were struggling to stop teams. He comes off the bench and he essentially started doing things that Marcus Smart wasn't able to do now that Marcus Smart has assumed a starting guard's role. Like Marcus Smart, it was easier for him to do it when he was coming off the bench. Now he's beginning to understand that he can no longer think in that capacity, that he has to apply it judiciously. Malcolm Brogdon has more freedom. And so it's not even the expectation about him scoring the basketball as much as it is that he is helping that second unit become one of the better defensive second units in the NBA. It's because of the second unit that the Celtics have a respectable defensive ranking, right? Because their starters are not as good as what they were a year ago. And I think a lot of that comes down to the way that Malcolm Brogdon has played that game. So what I'm saying is that it's not just about the points, which I'm sure is going to always what we lean on. You look at the defensive metrics as well too that Malcolm Brogdon brings to the table. Forget the wins. I'm just talking about defensive metrics. I think Malcolm Brogdon has done an outstanding job on both sides of the ball to warrant, to me, getting that midseason award as sixth man of the
year. Wow. I mean, look at you coming all the way around on the Brogdon situation. So hey, I think we love for that to be the ultimate case.
Eating that humble pie like it's good. That is me right now.
It's dope. And
yeah, you know what I'm saying? And I'm going to get some hot chocolate with that as well, too.
I think all the guys, though, Mathurin and Westbrook actually lead and Poole. Like, so those are the top three guys in terms of minutes. Brogdon is playing the least amount of actual minutes. So in terms
of he
like
does with it, man.
yeah, 5 minutes less a game. So that's, a production time that he's not getting that the other guys are getting. But I think, for us, we both want to steer away from just, hey, the guy who scores the most. Right. We both would love for it to be the overall impact of what that player is bringing. So I think Brogdon, in terms of from his defensive standpoint, is very important. But I also think for me is Westbrook, because it's not just him scoring 15 a game. It's him getting others involved. He's still rebounding the ball, 6-7 assists a game as well, too. And so to me, you get somebody coming off the bench, and we know who Westbrook is. He is a stat chaser. But, whatever, call it 16, 7, and 7, off the bench is really, really positive.
And let me highlight one last thing, Shaw, and then we'll get into our final midseason award, which will be the MVP, because you just highlighted a really, really important point in why I make these distinctions, say, between a Malcolm Brogdon and a Jordan Poole and Mathurin. When I look at Mathurin and Poole, it seems like those guys have to be put in situations to thrive at what they're good at, right? Poole, at times, when you see him come into the game, there are times where he just doesn't even score the basketball, which renders him absolutely useless to the rotation. Like, if he's not scoring the ball, like, what exactly he's doing? He's not really a great defender. He's not really, a sound rebound. Like, I'm not saying that these are not things that he can improve on. He's young, much like Mathurin. Young. This is stuff that's going to take time. Whereas with Brogdon and with Westbrook, that's what they've been doing. And they've recognized that even when they're not scoring the basketball, the fact that they know how to rebound, the fact that they know how to defend, the fact that they know how to switch on the pick and pops and things, all of these things, I think, have a direct correlation in the confidence that coaches have when you can run a Malcolm Brogdon in the final minutes of a game, where you can run a Russell Westbrook with final minutes of the game out there, because you know what they're going to give you. If it's not going to be points, it's going to be something else, because they're good at those particular things. They're like a Swiss Army knife, which I just think is critical in being the sixth man nowadays. It's not just about putting points in the basket.
Well said, brother.
All right, Shaw. You know what that time is, right? It's time for us to talk MVP. But hold up. We got to do a plug. Of course, bills have got to be paid. So on the flip side, we will round off our breakdown by discussing who our midseason MVP is going to be. You don't want to miss out on that here on the Baseline. Yes, sir. We are back. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, our midseason awards on the breakdown, and final one that we want to go ahead and kind of dig in on real quick, Shaw, MVP. So midseason award, who are you giving out that MVP trophy to?
Yeah, so the situation for me here is going to be about ultimately winning. I think statistically, it's Luka, pretty much hands down. He's had just a monstrous season statistically. It's not his fault, that they are not necessarily at the top of the Western Conference, and they've oscillated. They've been, as high I think as 3 or maybe even 4. Then they kind of drop back down to the 6-7 range or whatever. So they're supposed to be in the kind of middle of the pack. So I think he might actually win it if these numbers stay at where they're at. But it's the guy nobody wants to be bothered with again, and it's Jokic. While Tatum obviously has had his best case here, and I think in some ways Tatum's case is forwarded some by how good Jalen Brown really is. I see Jalen Brown. And yeah, I see him, and I know the Celtics team could not be as good as they are with Tatum alone. I just think Jokic is just that interconnective tissue for the Denver Nuggets, currently as the best team in the Western Conference as well. And what they have in him, and when he decides, hey, I'm going to give you 40 and 20, or maybe I'll give you 15, 15 and 15. Just being able to read what the team needs as to the true centerpiece of what they do, kind of in all things, and his defense has improved over the last couple of years. There's almost no chance he'll win a third MVP in a row. And I think, what Sam Quinn on CBS has said is like, if we were to actually look at season by season and not, this guy got it 2 years in a row, that would have prevented, or that wouldn't have gotten in the way of guys like LeBron and Michael Jordan when they were still the best players at the top of their proverbial game. I think Jokic is still the best at this proverbial game right now, with what is now the best team in the Western Conference. And, he's been my midseason pick, but Luka has the overall statistics and just kind of like the eye-popping stuff that kind of gets you. But again, I think Jokic is the guy. What about you?
Luka is going to wind up winning my midseason, but when it's all said and done, I think Nikola Jokic winds up winning the MVP.
So,
right?
So it's interesting. You have the same take, but different in terms of like how it will play itself out.
So I look at the overall dominance of the first half of this season, and it's hard pressed for me not to acknowledge what Luka has been able to do. Because what was the one thing that we've said over the last few years about Luka? He starts off slow, and then he kind of starts picking up momentum. It's ironic because none of these guys that we're talking about, Jason Tatum, Jokic, Durant, Antetokounmpo, none of them started off slow. All of them started off like just with a level of dominance that made us say, my God, there's probably only going to be like 3 teams they're going to be able to, that are going to be competing for this NBA championship, right? And that even includes when Steph Curry, before his injury, what he was on. He was on another level too, right?
Yeah.
And for us to be talking about Luka in that conversation, if not more so, speaks to me more about how this first half of this season is all about the Don. It's all about the Doncic, man. And I'm not saying that he's like run away or nothing like that. What I'm saying is he had to elevate to such a degree that we had to put him in this conversation, even despite how the Dallas Mavericks are barely above 500. You know what I'm saying? But yet they're still among one of the top 5 teams in the Western Conference. He's pulled out victories for this team that had no business for this team to be winning. And so when it's all said and done, because I don't know whether or not he could sustain this for a whole season, I'm going to acknowledge is at least this first half of the season, Luka Doncic deserves that MVP. But when it's all said and done, I think when you finally look at it through its totality, because I think that Doncic is going to wear out. And we did this with Jokic. You know what I'm saying? Jokic, his problem, he wears out towards the end of the season. You can see him, and he's in his stride right now. He's making it look effortless. You know what I'm saying? And everybody else, it's all about load management and injuries. Jason Tatum cancels himself out at times because he doesn't overall dominate games, because we acknowledge that next to him, Jalen Brown is just that dude as well, too. And so I'm not saying that we shouldn't consider it. He probably could wind up being the MVP by the NBA standards when we get to the end of the season. But it's hard pressed to see Jason Tatum put together the kind of dominance that a Luka Doncic does if Jason Tatum is not playing next to Jalen Brown. That has to happen before we see things like that for Jason Tatum. So that's where I'm at when it comes to me and how I look at the MVP. But you know what? At the end of the day, man, we're all winners for this because at every single moment, every turn, we saw dominating stints for each and every single one of these guys. And they were so dominant that we had to keep them in the conversation about the MVP by the time we got to the halfway point. We just couldn't excuse it and just say it was a blip on the radar. These guys were balling this first half of the season. So which is the reason why, to me, it spoke more volumes about what Luka Doncic did for the Mavericks and for what the NBA got an opportunity to see in what kind of dominance he can actually give you.
Yeah. Well, again, very well said. And let us be clear here. We're actually Celtics fans if you're just tuning into the baseline for the first time. So we're not trying to knock Tatum down a peg in any capacity.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, but we're very much, cognizant of how much Jalen Brown actually means to that. And ironically, for Denver to have a certain level of success, Jokic does need Murray and Porter and KCP and Aaron Gordon, all those guys, to be successful. But his ability to kind of just be whatever the team needs is really kind of like what I say. And I think where Luka just kind of dominates in a way that is almost overbearing at times, to give you like those super, super gaudy numbers. I think Jokic just does a little bit better for his team. But I think we both agree in some ways Luka probably wins it just because of the statistical dominance is so vibrant, especially this year. And your point about starting off the season is really, really poignant. Like he did start off, came in shape, et cetera, et cetera. Everything was going well for him. So, again, I don't think we can lose here. And it's a great, great, great season of NBA competitive basketball with a lot of teams that are in the running and a lot of players putting up some major numbers as well.
And I would be remiss if we didn't highlight a little bit of love to Kevin Durant. Okay. I think we can say without a shadow of a doubt who ultimately the leader of that team is for the Brooklyn Nets, right?
Sure.
Like he's just not the kind of leader that I think in most other NBA circles and teams who've won championships, he just doesn't represent what the standard of that leader is supposed to look like, outspoken, always up in the huddle and stuff like that. Durant allows his play to dictate how valuable a player he is to any team that he is on, to his teammates and the organization abroad. And I think that to me speaks volumes as well, too. It's not something that I think is going to be a metric that you look at in giving the MVP, but I think it highlights the significance of why this season is so important to the Brooklyn Nets, Shaw, right? Like we're not going to be talking about Kyrie Irving and the influence that he's going to have on his team. We're going to be talking about Kyrie Irving and what he needs to do to supplement what Kevin Durant brings to this team for them to be a championship caliber basketball team. And so this was one of the things that we had talked about, like when we talk about MVP, is that part of that conversation? Because these guys could put up numbers. They could do it in their sleep. But what does it translate to when they're losing games? What does it translate to when they make critical turnovers? What does it translate to when the guys don't step up when it's necessary? And so I want to make sure I give kudos to Kevin Durant because under all of that turmoil, under all of that craziness, he came back in and he helped elevate that team. He, in some ways, influenced Kyrie Irving to see the bigger picture for his NBA future. And you can see how it translates to them now being one of the more dynamic duos. And they are a legitimate team to be up against the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks and the rest of those other top echelon Eastern Conference teams. It's just a question of whether or not they're going to finish the job and solidify that case by the time they get to the playoffs.
As you wax poetic around Durant, I won't belabor us because I know we're short on time. I will just say, very much well due to KD. I'd also throw Ja's name into that as well too. Ja Morant, the Memphis Grizzlies tied in the Western Conference with the Denver Nuggets for number one in that conference. So Ja as just not only the on the court leader, but the spiritual leader, I think as well too. So
and
again, just great basketball.
And the Instagram leader.
He absolutely yammed on Jalen Smith. Yeah, if you've somehow missed that, make sure you go check that on Instagram or Twitter or somewhere or another, man, because dunk of the year by far and away.
What was that? Gas face alert?
Oh, yes. Oof.
Oh my gosh. Somebody need to put that tombstone on homie's on homie's career right there.
For sure.
He needs to start posting some numbers because you don't want to be remembered for that. You don't want to be remembered for that. Way too much going on in the social media ethos.
For sure.
Awesome show this week, Shaw. So much we went into, so much we covered, man. But it's great to see, like, some new names, some new faces that have been added to this list by the time we get to the midseason. I hope that their names are continue to be bantered about by the time we get towards the end of the season. And for all of these teams that we've given props to, kudos, and we have scrutinized, we hope that the narrative either stays the same, is elevated some, or is changed significantly for the better, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, it's all positive vibes here, bro. That's all it is. So as always, tune into the baseline and let us know on social media how you feel about some of these picks with the teams that you think are going to be teams to watch here in the second half of the season, players to watch second half, and what do you think about our midseason awards as always, bro? Good stuff.
Absolutely, man. For the baseline, Callie, Warren, Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for joining us this week in our midseason report, midseason awards.